How do you discern God's will? We're going to talk about that today on Happy Hour. Welcome back to Happy Hour, our podcast for young adults here at the Cathedral of the Most Sacred Heart of Jesus. I'm Rick.
And I'm Holly.
And we have a special guest in studio we'll get to in a minute. But Holly, you sound a little different. What's different about you?
Yes, I'm calling in today from Georgia. I'm back home.
Yay.
Doing well.
How's that been? So classes ended, and you're back home for a couple of weeks, but you got some big stuff coming up. You want to share that with us?
Yes. I'm going to be headed to Austin, Texas in 2 weeks, or about 10 days actually, for an internship at the Texas School for the Deaf.
Wow. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I'm really excited. New city, haven't explored it yet. Very excited to see what it will bring.
Don't you have a friend there? No.
I have a friend that lives in Dallas, yes, and she will be traveling as well to Austin because she also has an internship there.
Whoa. So are you guys going to be at the same place? You get to live together or just close, or what's the deal?
Yeah, we'll be about 10 minutes away from each other. So we'll be doing our internships throughout the week, and then we will explore Austin on the weekends. So a very good setup because I have someone that I know there.
That's incredible. Wow. You don't have to do it alone.
Nope. Never have to go through things alone.
That's right.
It's a good team.
I love it.
Life.
That is great. Mm-hmm. Well, today we also have another special guest in studio with us today. He's been on the podcast before, but I think only once. We're bringing him back, though. Senior at Marian University in Indianapolis, Indiana. We have with us today my eldest, Noah. Noah, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good.
So you get to be with us in studio, and we're going to be talking about discerning. I think that's a good topic, and I'm going to give some all the props to Holly because this was her idea to talk about this. And she's got a great book she's going to reference. I've got a great Father Mike Schmidt's video I'm going to reference. I think Noah's got even a paper that he wrote this year.
Indeed, yeah.
On discernment that he will reference. We got a lot of stuff to get to. So why don't we jump in and just get to it? Holly, so this topic came up for you. What really was the impetus for bringing this topic up?
Right. So I recently read a book called Pray, Decide, and Don't Worry, and it's 5 steps to discerning God's will. So that was definitely the premise of me thinking about this topic. And I kind of was just thinking it's like the end of the year. We're going into summer. A lot of us are nostalgic based on our experiences, let's say, from this past year or school year. And it just kind of came to me because I was like, from this point, we have to kind of decide, like, we look back, but we have to decide how we're going to move forward and what we are being called to do this summer and in the future. So I was kind of thinking about those themes and topics to discuss today. And I thought, and it's awesome that Noah's here on air too, to get another perspective from like another college student, especially going into senior year, yes?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Well,
which you are too.
Yes, that is true.
Wow.
So it's just the last year before we're off into the world. And it's definitely a very big time in our lives. So I would also like to hear, Noah, how, like, you even wrote about it. That's pretty cool. What was the topic of that paper?
Yeah, so this one, the topic of the paper that I wrote, so I took a marriage class this last semester, and it was really just talking about how marriage is an important thing to determine in one's discernment, whether or not to get married or to live out the religious life. And one of the biggest things I kind of talked about in there, pulling from John Chrysostom, was that a lot of people can sort of feel forced into going into the priesthood or living a religious life because it is a holier or like closer calling to God. Like, oh, if I really want to truly be holy and live out my faith, like holy, then I have to be a priest, or I have to be a nun or a monk, which isn't true. John Chrysostom points out this really well, that marriage can be the holiest calling for you. God does not call everybody to the religious life. And so because that's part of God's plan, it is the holiest thing for you. And it was just really cool. Just letting people know that marriage can be even a holier calling than religious life for people whose plan it is to get married. So
that's pretty neat.
Wonderful.
Yeah, isn't that
Wow.
cool? Just to think of that perspective instead of comparing apples and oranges, right? Because I think we tend to do that, and that's a problem because God has a unique will for each of us. It's not the same will for all of us, right? And so when you look at it through that lens, it does change things quite a bit. I like, Holly, that, the fact that, the school year's ending. So for a lot of people, this is that kind of transition time. We really do have to start thinking about the future. But also, this is a great topic for when we roll around New Year's, right? Because it just seems like, okay, New Year's, it's a new year. I can really start to think differently about life. I can maybe make some changes that I want to, or start to move in a new direction. And I think those markers are good, but really this is a topic for every day. This discernment is an everyday topic. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, most definitely. Yes. Discernment can be for like the small little things in life, or the more monumentous occasions, I would say, like for vocation. But I guess you can break discernment into everyday life, because you have to, part of discernment is to sift through, or like separate apart your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and to really like break it down. And that requires time, typically. So it's not going to be a one-day thing. Discernment isn't like a snap of your fingers and it's done, right? It's a process, like conversion.
Right. And the best discernment always happens with time. So that's a good thing. And it's not like, God doesn't give us time to discern. So that's available to us. I think that there's some key words that we got to keep in mind. We keep talking about God's will, but we also have to talk about our will, because the importance of our own free will to God. In fact, it's so important. It's the one thing God doesn't touch, right? It's so vital to who we are, who he created us to be, that he will not mess with our free will, no matter what. Even if what we choose to do is going to send us to hell, he is not going to interfere with our choice. Now, he will give us every opportunity to choose a relationship with him, to choose to be with him, but he's not going to force us into it. So to understand that our free will is an aspect of this discernment process, meaning, like, I think sometimes people maybe like the idea of just saying, okay, God, I don't know, so you just tell me what to do. And we remove our own free will out of the equation. That's a bad thing. God gave us that free will for a reason and a purpose. So to just kind of throw it on his shoulders or in his lap and just say, okay, well, you know what? I don't know what to choose. I don't know what to do. So God, you just tell me what to do. You do it for me. That actually negates the greatest gift that he gave us outside of salvation, which is our free will. So it's really important that we acknowledge that our free will is a part of this process. In fact, it's a huge portion of this process. It's wonderful to want to bend to the will of God. That's what we should do. But at the same time, he gave us our free will to do the work ourselves as well. And when we do that, what I notice when we do the work, we have skin in the game. It means more to us, because we could always look back if we just said, hey, God, whatever you want me to do, just let me do it. Just make me do it. Right. And then later on, we can go back in our minds and go, gosh, if I could just choose it over again, I wouldn't have done this or that, or we'd have some ill feelings towards that. But when we have skin in the game, when we get to choose that as well, when we know that we have made that decision, that we fight for that decision even harder. Mm-hmm. So we do have to acknowledge our own free will in this process of discernment. Now, in your book, Holly, that you've been reading, that harkens back, that book really is kind of going back to a saint that we've referenced a couple of times here. Is that correct?
Yes. There's a few saints referenced, but I think one of the main ones was Saint Ignatius of Loyola.
Mm.
He has a lot of amazing tips. And I mean, going off what you're saying, you can never make a decision with 100% certainty.
Mm.
And that's part of faith, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really difficult sometimes because one of our main overarching questions can sometimes be like, am I doing your will, God? Like, and you over obsess about it. I'm guilty of this. I don't but
Same.
yes, it's very difficult because you're like over obsessing about it and you're just, but you get stuck in this holding pattern where you need to like eventually take action with, as well with that. That's kind of what was brought to mind based on what you're saying. Saint Ignatius has a few tips for us. And I mean, many great saints say like, be not afraid, in taking that next step towards trusting in God and making that step in discernment. But we must take action at some point or it's not going to work out.
Yeah, 100%. So, and I know we talked a little bit about when I think a lot of people think when we talk about discernment, we're only talking about, are you going to be a priest, a nun, or are you going to get married? And that's it. That's the only discernment we really need to deal with, right? But that's not true. No, what other areas do we need to discern in life? Like what other moments? Now I know, Holly, you also referenced it with like our futures and stuff, but can you think of any other areas that we need to discern in life?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely vocation, what we're called to spend our life achieving towards. But also, I think a big one can be how we can be involved in the communities that are in our lives, that surround us. How can we give back to that community? And there's a multitude of ways you can do that. And I think an important one is actually hearkening back to my sophomore year when I took a class on the church. We sort of learned about this community in Indy, where this guy really wanted to help out his community by helping out other people find their place in the community. It was really cool because it was this thing called, it was like ABCD, asset-based community development. And so he essentially like reached out to a ton of people in his neighborhood and he found out just what they were good at. And like, can they garden? Can they fix bikes? Can they, all this stuff? And it was so cool. And I went there on a field trip at the end of that class to see what it was like. And everyone was just, they had their own role. It was crazy. Like I said, there was one person who owned a bike shop and people who had bikes in the neighborhood, they were able to fix. There was like a neighborhood community garden that people could visit and like get food. It was awesome. So I think, just like recognizing your own gifts and talents and using those to find your role into a community to really give back and like be that image of God to like not just receive from the community, but to give back to it.
I really like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do too. Is there a an end to discernment? And what I mean by that is, do we discern if we are going to make a purchase of this car or that car? Do we make a discernment on what friends should I hang out with? Do we make a discernment on, this house or that house? Or am I going to wear, excuse me, am I going to wear these socks or those socks? Like where does the line end at discernment? What do you think about that, Holly?
I think for the most part, there are everyday choices that are more like easy to accomplish. I typically associate discernment with something that's more of a larger life decision. It can be even the simple things, but I think that they're the things that ground you in God's will for your life, specifically. So maybe like socks, that's not going to really determine God's will for your life. But if it's something concerning, like you were saying, like who your friends will be, or your vocation, or what Noah was saying about your identity and the gifts that you have received, what matters most to you in this life will drive discernment, I think.
Yeah, I think because the problem sometimes I believe is that if we go off the deep end, and let's just face it, our society, we tend to be extremists, right? So we go extreme one way or the other. And I think that can happen with discernment as well, where we just feel like, well, I just want to do the Lord's will in every aspect. The Lord, should I take another breath? You know, like, should I take 2 steps or 3 steps? I think sometimes we can get a little overboard, so much so that we are frozen to act. That we just are trying to discern every little aspect of our lives so deeply that we're just frozen and we don't act, especially when the Lord needs us to. So I think we don't want to, we definitely have to discern all the big moments of life. I believe that. And I think you nailed it, Holly. The things concerning our relationship with the Lord as well is where we should really pour ourselves into discernment. But let's not go crazy, okay? I think we can go too far one way or the other. So a good balance is key. Now, when I was watching the Father Mike Schmidt's video, he had 4 questions to ask when you are discerning really any aspect of those relational aspects with the Lord. Should we go through those?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I really liked them. I think it's something that our listeners can just even jot down and say, oh yeah, here's the 4 questions. They're simple, they're easy, but also they're complicated and they're difficult. So get ready for that. Here we go. First question. When you're discerning something, so if it's, what your vocation is going to be, what, relationships you're going to have, those type of things. The first question is this: is this a good door to walk through? Right? So or even a neutral door. And I really like this idea because it closes a lot of doors already. Okay. Question number 1, is this a good door or even a neutral door? Closes a lot of doors, because if it's an evil door or a bad door, the door's closed and you don't even have to ask the other 3 questions, right? If it's evil or bad, door closed. Simple. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple idea, but it's an effective one, right? Like, it's almost like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Like, we should go through a good door, but like, sometimes the bad doors can seem like good ones in the moment, if we're not really thinking too hard about it. So I really like this as a first step. Just really make sure that it is a good door you're walking through.
You ever have to shut the door on any evil doors there, Holly?
Oh, yes.
We're getting deep.
I like how they can be. I like how you say that they can be guised as a good door. That's really important too in discernment. So, in first figuring out if it's truly like a good thing I should be doing or not a good thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that. It kind of covers a whole multitude of things, but like Noah said, it does require you to actually think a little bit as well. Like, what's the outcome going to be if I walk through this door? Not just the immediacy of it, but long term. What's the outcome? Is it a good or a neutral? That's fine then. Then that's a possibility. I'm not saying if it is a good door, then just walk through it, because there's 3 more questions to get through. But what we are saying is if it's a bad door or an evil door, all right, good. Close it, move on. Let's find a new door. Okay, so that's number 1. Is this a good door or even a neutral door? Question number 2, is this an open door? Is this something that is even open to the possibility? So let's say it was a relationship aspect, okay? So is it a good door? That was the first question. Okay, yes. So you want to get into a relationship with someone. Okay, there's good there, right? That's not an evil one. I guess it could be depending on the person, but
Depends.
I'm sure, if it was Hitler or something. Okay, yeah, let's close. Let's shut that down. Move on. New door.
Maybe avoid that one.
Yeah. Okay. I will acknowledge there are probably some bad doors there, but for the most part, do you want to get into a relationship? That's probably a good door. But is this an open door? Does that person know you exist, or even share kind of those those feelings towards you? Is that even an option for you? So you have to ask the question: is this an open door? Now, Holly, you go to UT, but you're from Georgia, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to apply. You had to when you were discerning where you were going to go for college. At what point did you know that was an open door for you to actually do this?
Right. So I applied, I believe, at 10 colleges, which is a lot,
wow.
and toured 9 of them. So I had an open door in the sense that, like, I applied, I put in the work, and all but one accepted me, which was good. So I had a lot of options, a lot of open doors. I think what I didn't believe when people were telling me about college tours, like, it's like home, you just know it. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, you don't just know, and I toured 9 colleges, and the very last one was UT. And I was like, okay, let's see what this brings. I haven't felt that feeling, quote unquote yet. And when I went there, I felt that. And I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Like, it's real. So I was like, okay. And that was definitely part of my discernment process, going through all of the open doors, and trying all of them as well. So you might be faced with many open doors, and I think it would be wise to see what God has in store for you through those multiple avenues if you do have them. But sometimes you might be faced with a lot of closed doors, and maybe there are no jobs open around you, or like that will kind of automatically shut that door, or like there might be a rejection letter involved. You never know. But I would try to take everything in stride, and also go through all the open doors that God provides you.
Yeah, I think that's really wise advice. And now you got me thinking, what college did you not tour of the 10? But you don't have to say, that's okay. And
what Doctor, but it's a far drive, honestly, so we didn't really want to make it. But
that is a bit of a drive. I think that's really sage advice there. So that's excellent. So our first question is this a good door, even a neutral door? The second question is it an open door, right? So that's excellent. That's great. We're going to move on to door number 3. Is this a wise door? Now, what do we mean by that? Well, you. Nobody knows you outside of the Lord better than you, right? So you know who you are. You know who you're meant to be. Is the door that you're about to walk through a wise door, knowing who you are? So it could be that it's a good door. It could be that it's an open door. But does that mean it's a wise door for you to walk through? Right? So Noah, you know yourself, right? There are some maybe moments of you want to jump into this ministry, or you want to jump into this fun thing, or whatever it is. It's good, nothing wrong with it, or it's neutral. It's open. The invite's there, but maybe knowing who you are, it's not a wise choice to go through that door. Have you ever felt that, or seen that in your life?
Sorry. Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking about this recently. I think this is something I've kind of struggled with really since high school. Something that my mind immediately jumped to was extracurricular activities at high school and college, right? There's always the popular kid that is super smart, super, is handsome or beautiful, and is super involved with everything. There's always at least that one student, right? And so I really, I wanted to get involved a lot, because it sort of like built up your cred as a student.
Oh yeah.
And it just made you seem cooler or more popular or smarter, right? And so there's also the aspect of I wanted to get involved in these things, possibly for my future, like build my resume, build my interests. And same goes for college. Like, there were so many groups, clubs that I could be a part of. Just things that my friends invited me to all the time. Going to choir, doing the San Damiano Scholar Program, all these things. But I think something that's really important to remember is like a lot of those things were good for me. And a lot of these things were open because they were either like hiring or looking for members. But I think in a lot of cases, it wasn't wise for me to be a part of it, mostly because I had already been involved in other things. And so something that I remember that I was told was, if you stretch yourself too thin, you're not going to be committed to one thing. You're just going to kind of being like half in it in everything else. And so I remember I had to do this after my freshman year, after I got involved in, I think I was involved in like 5 different clubs, and like I had the San Damiano Scholars Program, and I had a friend group, and I had, a family to keep updated with. And so I just kind of took a step back, and I was like, I'm just so busy that I can't put my heart into anything.
Yeah.
And so I stepped back from some programs and, just really kept the ones that I wanted to be a part of and I wanted to grow more in. And so, yeah, I guess that's my advice is like, get involved in things for sure. Like, don't take my advice as not getting involved into anything because it's too stressful. Have a healthy amount of like involvement and just really make sure you're not stretching yourself thin.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Something that we can all take a part of. I see that even in the church, like we'll get some really great people who volunteer, but they end up volunteering because they really want to serve the Lord, that is a great desire, but they kind of place themselves all over the place and they get burnt out too. And so now there's a negative aspect of it. So it's that healthy balance of that. All right. So question number one is this good? Is this a good door or even a neutral door? Number two is this an open door? Number three, is this a wise door, knowing who you are and who you're meant to be? So then we come to question 4. Now, this is the one I kind of referred to a little bit earlier that we need to keep in mind. This is a big question. I love that Father Mike Schmitz asked this question. He said, and actually Father Mike Schmitz said this was from a book that he read. So these 4 questions weren't directly from him, but from a book that he read. The question number 4 is this a door that I want? Right? Because you have free will. Because you do get to choose. In fact, you're the one that gets to make the choice. So the 4th question is this a door that I want? Holly, I think sometimes when we're looking to discern, we remove our own desires from the equation. I think that can definitely happen where we kind of just say, okay, put myself aside. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It has everything to do with the Lord. That sounds like really a very Christian speak, right? But the reality is God also gave us our desires because he wants us to find fulfillment in what we do. He's not making a bunch of slaves to do what he wants us to do. He is giving us desires and fulfillment and instills in us what we want to do as well. So this important door of, is this a door that I want? Can you see how maybe we can place ourselves on the back burner and maybe not even pay attention to ourselves at all when we're discerning?
Oh, yes, that definitely happens. I am guilty as charged. I am a people pleaser and I like to take on other people's emotions. So that means that I need to remember that I can't feel forced in my decision or discernment based on expectations of others or other people's emotions. Now, it's very important to seek counsel from good sources like spiritual directors, priests, sisters, nuns, monks, friends, Yes. It's very good to do that, but it's very important to remember yourself in that, because what at least I do is I take all of that and then I try to sort their emotions and their feelings based on the way they perceive the world and their missions, and try to take that on myself. So it's very important to separate yourself from it in a healthy way, but also take into account what is relevant. But I definitely take that pressure on myself to please others. So it's very important, if you are like me, raise your hands,
we just did. So just so you know.
Okay. It's very important to separate yourself from that in your process of discernment. And God doesn't want you to be miserable either.
That's right.
He doesn't want you to be the question, is this a door that you want to walk through? And you're I think God wants me to do this, but I just don't think that I'm going to be happy, at all. It's good to try and then you'll know, but he doesn't want you to be miserable.
That's
so
right.
if you're gotta be a religious sister, and it's something that you might not actually find your home with, he doesn't necessarily, he wants your desires as well to be fulfilled, like you were saying, Rick.
Yeah. I think authenticity is huge, right? So people can tell when you're authentic and when you're not. And And of course, the Lord knows your heart, so He knows when you're authentic and when you're not. And so when you encounter someone who is not authentically in the place they should be, you know, I have worked with people throughout my life who authentically did not want to work in the place they were working. Okay. And it showed. You could tell they were not the happiest people. Little things set you off. You find you're complaining more than you're praising, or it's almost like you're looking for ways to get out, as opposed to, if you really desire to be in a place, then even the small things that don't go right, they don't matter. You have an overall bigger picture because your heart is into it and you authentically want to be there. So yes, our desire for that is a very good desire. The Lord placed it there. It's not just coming out of nowhere. And we know that because if it were just coming out of nowhere, we would all have the same desire. Right? We wouldn't have different desires. It would be very simple. We would all have the same desires, and it would all line up. We would all want the same things. Otherwise, it has to come from somewhere else. Right? So if that's true, if that's the case, then whatever the Lord places in your life as a desire, a good desire, right? We have to look at that, and that has to be part of our discernment process. So if we go through the 4 questions that we need to ask in terms of discernment, let's just look at them one more time. So if you're listening and you wanted to jot these down real quick, or you have been as we've been going, great. Question number 1 is this a good door or even a neutral door? We'll accept a neutral door. That's fine. But if it's bad or evil, close it. Number 2, is this an open door? Does this have the ability for you to walk through? No matter if it's relationship, if it's work, if it's college, whatever it is this an open door? Number 3, is this a wise door? Meaning knowing who you are and your own proclivities and who you're meant to be. Is this a wise door for you to walk through? And number 4, is this a door that I want? Do I desire to walk through this door as well? And not to say that any of these doors are more important than the other. That's why there's 4. That's why they walk hand in hand. If you can say yes to all 4 of those questions before you walk through the door, then I think it's a door worth exploring for sure. And I think this is a good process for discernment. Now, there's other ways there's other things you can add in discerning, and maybe some people listening have some other advice, and we'd love to hear that. You can comment, you can post, whatever you want to do. Give us some advice. We would love that as well. But I know for us, this really speaks to a lot of truth, and I think it's a great start for people who are looking to discern areas of their life. So with that being said, we've gone over the 30-minute mark. I apologize. We do try to shoot for 25, but I don't even know the last time that happened, Holly. And
yeah, it'll just keep getting longer and longer. I have that prediction right now. So I'm saying it on here.
Listen, if your drive to work is 20 minutes and you're listening to us, just plan on listening to us on the way home as well. That's all I'm saying.
Little leftovers.
Yeah. Get the leftovers. Noah, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on. It's been an honor.
Yeah, we love it. And of course, Holly from Georgia, thank you so much for spending your time, and all the people listening. We appreciate you so much. And if you want to share this, maybe there's some people in your life who are wondering about discernment, or you have, or you yourself, but you just want to get that information out there. Click the share button, like, subscribe, all those fun things. We appreciate you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Happy Hour.